Welcome to the continuing series of Meet the Pros. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined today by my special guest, Gil Alexander. He's one of Pregame's newest pros coming in. And Gil, thank you for joining us here. We're taping live from the Las Vegas offices here at Pregame. And Gil, good to have you on board. I got to tell you, your post, your breakdown of baseball.
Thank you.
It's just it's mind-boggling, and we're going to get into this. I want everybody to meet you and tell us about it, and we'll get to those intense write-ups that you have. But first, tell our listeners that don't know Gil Alexander. I want to know first Gil Alexander, the person. Then we'll talk about Gil Alexander, the sports bettor.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show.
No problem.
I have reached the big time.
You're here.
Like so many of us have in terms of our first sort of story with gambling, I started my own football weekly betting pool when I was in third grade, and so that from that age, somehow I was just inclined to do that.
You beat me. Mine was in ninth grade. But, you're a little more advanced than me.
Perhaps my problem is worse. But yeah, I grew up in Washington D.C., East Coast guy like yourself. It's a redskin town, so it's all football all the time. But what's interesting is that, when we do get to talk about the betting portion, that's actually not my favorite sport to bet. So, but yeah, grew up in D.C. and then got into sort of the mainstream media, had a TV show in D.C. Then I moved to San Francisco in the mid-'90s and have lived in San Francisco ever since then doing radio. Good.
Now, you did have your own podcast, I understand. You've been doing sports podcasting really right when things were getting started. You're a little ahead of the curve.
Well, pretty much from the advent of podcasting back in 2005. But the great thing about what you all have done here at Pregame, and this is sort of what drew me to RJ and to you and VR, is that you really took what I just tried to do in a very token way, and you guys took it to like a completely different level, which to me is what makes Pregame so great. And specifically what that is attracting a type of sports bettor who is smart, who wants to learn, who wants to win, and does it in a way that is honest. And I think the way you guys approach that attracts that same sort of crowd.
Well, one of the things that's great about where we're at, the medium that we're using, is we don't have as many restrictions. When you're doing things in mainstream radio and stuff, it's taboo, and I just, there's such a stigma on sports betting that, I don't get it.
I don't either.
It shouldn't be. It should be a smart man. Wanting to invest money. Nobody. To me, a lot of times when I meet somebody for the first time and I tell them what I do, they give me that look. They have that look on their face, and then I say, "Listen, do you have a stockbroker?"
Right.
And he said, "Yeah, I invest in stocks." I said, "It's the same thing."
I talk about that phrase, market inefficiencies, all the time. That's how, to use the Warren Buffett example, that's how he made all his money.
Right.
And so I agree with you completely.
And nobody looks at, gambling on the stock market is, gamble, it's investing.
Right.
And if you're doing sports betting, as an investment, there's nothing wrong with it. And knowledge is power. I don't care what it is, what business you're in, sports betting. The more knowledge you have, the better you're equipped to make wise decisions. And that's what Pregame's all about. And guys like yourself, and this is a great segue into your blog, every day, your post in the forums whenever you break down the card is phenomenal.
Well, from you, that's a very big compliment. I thank you for that.
It's, and again, and we've been doing this with I call the young guns of Pregame, guys like, yourself, Dan Beebe, Mike Hook, Zach Lawson. You guys are the next generation. I mean, it's not a, bunch of guys smoking cigars and picking games. It's not It's not the 80s and those TV shows that, I'm hitting 85% over the last.
That's right. I'm documented 24-1 since yesterday.
This is real. And the beauty of Pregame is that our guys get to interact with you on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah.
Nowhere can you actually talk to cappers, ask them questions, and we provide so much free information in the good news is you're going to be doing, a daily podcast. You want to, tell our listeners about what they've got to look forward to with your show?
My podcast is going to be Monday through Friday, and Dan and Mike, of course, do the Today in Sports Betting Show, which is going to talk about games on a daily basis, and they do a great job, and Dan killed in the NBA, and Mike just destroyed in college basketball. And so there are going to be some bleeding similarities for sure. It's not like I'm not going to ignore the day's card, but I definitely, especially during baseball season, which is my favorite sport to bet, I do want to get into some minutia. And I am unabashedly a real dork when it comes to betting. And so I really, and this is, you and I are so different in the way we approach games. That's why I find what you do so fascinating, because you really get into the psychology of things. I rely on more of the data side of things as a factor. I won't say it's the only thing I do, obviously, but we want to talk about sabermetrics on some shows. We want to talk about, even getting into stats, like FIP, fielding independent pitching, which sounds like the geekiest thing in the world, but yet really does inform, in my opinion, and hopefully the record bears out that I have some basis for this, that it really helps towards winning over the long term. And that's just an example of something.
It's great stuff. And the beauty of pregame, like you said, I mean, we're as diverse in handicapping styles as you can be. But yet, when you take different roads and if you end up at the same spot, it's powerful stuff. Yeah. And there's just there's such a collection at pregame of cappers with different methods, different techniques, and we've got guys that long term have been proven winners here in the collection. And it's not like everything that we have. It's not like we throw you some cheap stuff out there and all the premium stuff's but there is quality stuff that is given away for free on this site. And a phrase that I've always used, and it's things that with our podcast, with our blogs, and everything that we do, and things that you'll be talking about, is not only are we talking about that day, but we're giving you stuff that carries on the whole season that helps you become a better handicapper yourself. And I use the phrase, teach a guy to fish, he eats, he can eat forever. And that's what we do at pregame. Now, you mentioned that baseball was your favorite sport to bet. Mm-hmm. I always make that a two-part question. Is your favorite sport to watch and bet the same, or is it different?
Not at all. Which I'm sort of hesitant to even admit that, but it's true. I having grown up where I grew up in D.C., it is almost a natural thing to become just a rabid pro football fan. And so I'm a football guy from growing up first. That's always going to be the sport that I end up watching the most.
You're talking about a guy that came from Pittsburgh.
That's right. So you get it completely. Yeah. But for the reasons that we sort of touched upon, because it's a more statistical-based sport, I am unapologetically a baseball bettor first. So even if I don't watch it as much as I watch pro football, and some of that's the nature of a 162-game schedule, and how are you really going to be able to watch every game for every team, but in general, that's the sport that, and we've all been doing this a long time, historically, I have really been able to have the most success in. And as a result, and sort of, even results aside, but that certainly helps, it's the one that is most fascinating to me because I think I can get the best edge on it as a result of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is going to be a good spot for us to take a break here in segment one. We're going to have part two of this, of the Meet the Pros with Gil, and we'll carry over and we'll talk about that baseball and making money because bottom line, that's what it's about. It doesn't matter what it doesn't matter if it's baseball, football, basketball, hockey. Hockey's the least popular sport for anybody to bet. And I tell people when we got a hot hockey handicapper, and we've got a few at the site, you don't have to like to bet hockey.
Right.
All you have to like is to make money. So, and you make the bet with a guy that's an expert in that and doing well, and you don't worry about it. But he's Gil Alexander. I'm Marco D'Angelo. We'll be right back with part two of Meet the Pros with Gil Alexander.